Today we're talking the John Romita Sr. era of Spider-Man. So this is the second half of the Stan Lee run. There are some other artists in there. I believe John Buscema and Gil Kane are in there as well. But overall, we're going to call it the John Romita Sr. run. He completely changes the look and feel of Spider-Man. My opinion, for the better. If you watched my video on Steve Ditko, you could be like, he seems a little sour on Ditko. And that's not exactly the case. I have the appreciation for it. But I found the Romita era to just be a lot faster and just kind of more entertaining. I don't know if it necessarily makes it better. An issue like this, Amazing Spider-Man 50, where he quits being Spider-Man, I would say is definitely one of the highlights and one of the definitely better issues. But overall, I don't know if objectively it is better. You kind of go from a 9 and 6 panel grid to more like 3 to 5 panels, so it opens things up a little bit. And the thing about back then is they would put as many words in each panel as possible. So if there were 5 panels and there were 30 words in each panel, that's 150 words. But if there's 3 panels with 30 words, it's 90 words. And I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of those 60 extra words aren't needed. So I think that helps make the reading experience a lot better. The Steve Ditko era, Peter Parker was mostly in high school. He does get to go to college a little bit there at the end, but I would say the majority of that run is Peter Parker in high school. It's surprising how little Peter Parker was actually in high school during the comics. I think it was only about 30 issues, maybe even just 20 or something like that. But it really was not a lot. The majority of the time you see Peter Parker in school in the comics is college. Now, whether it's graduate, postgraduate, whatever it is, it's mostly always in college, other than Untold Tales of Spider-Man by Kurt Busiek and the Ultimate Spider-Man. That's different. We're not talking about Ultimate Spider-Man yet. With John Romita, everything changes a little bit. The first thing that I think is the most noticeable thing that changes is Peter Parker is likable. Because with Steve Ditko, I kind of understand why he was bullied. He's really rude, and I get that it's like a defense mechanism because he's bullied, but I don't think the Peter Parker of the Steve Ditko Spider-Man is pretty much likable at all. Now, John Romita, if you remember, I said Steve Ditko kind of drew everybody a little bit uglier and it's all a little bit frumpy. Well, Romita, glamorous, gorgeous, beautiful art. He introduces Mary Jane Watson, who further illustrates how his story was glamorous and the people looked great. This put Peter Parker with a group of friends like Harry Osborn and Flash Thompson. So now the former bully was more of like a friend, or at least a guy who could kind of give him a hard time, but kind of like him. It's a very interesting dynamic where Steve Ditko really had Peter Parker as kind of the solitary loner. Now we are starting to see him as, more in his community. It's not just him disappointing his aunt or letting maybe a school assignment go wrong, but now it's a lot more with his peers, which is good. I think that really helps give it a relatability and liven it up. So I think that people would really enjoy that aspect. All right, real quick before we keep going, I wrote a comic book. You can check it out on the TikTok shop. It's called Treasure of the Mystic Cards. We do have a 110-page graphic novel coming out soon with this. You can check the links in my bio for more information on that. As you can see, some of the art looks really phenomenal. It's a bit of an adventure story with magic, monsters, humor, and heart. It's good for kids. It's good for adults. Check it out. You won't be let down. Now, one interesting thing that also changes is you go from the Ditko era where you had guys like the Enforcers and the Green Goblin being these sort of street level gangster thugs, and having sort of the main ongoing narrative. Not every issue is about them, but if you look at it as on a larger whole, a lot of the issues are. That really changes, I think, in the Romita era. Now, I haven't read these in quite some time, so I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, but the first thing that happens is we finally learn who the Green Goblin is, which is what I believe drove Steve Ditko off of the title. He was like, this is a stupid idea. It shouldn't be Norman Osborn. And Stan Lee was like, no, it should be somebody we know and all that. I guess people originally believed that the Green Goblin was potentially J. Jonah Jameson. That's what I've always read, that people thought it was going to be him, which is such a funny idea. So that, I guess, made Steve Ditko leave. I don't think he wanted it to be J. Jonah Jameson. I think he wanted it to be just like a random guy, like it would probably be. Because what are the odds that, oh, hey, this supervillain's actually my friend's dad? So, anyway. But with the bringing on of Romita, we start off with the reveal that Norman is the Green Goblin. So this has become a huge issue, and it's interesting because after this, you don't really see the Green Goblin for quite some time. You do see Norman Osborn because he does live with Harry Osborn. So you get that dynamic, but you really don't get a lot of Norman, I think, until might be the drug issue where Harry's doing drugs and then Norman becomes Goblin again during that time. I think that's something like that. He may have had one appearance in between, but we don't get any new goblins yet. That's going to be later on down the line. So that was really cool with Norman. So really there are two very significant Norman stories in this era. As for Dr. Octopus, his most significant story this time would be the death of Captain Stacy, which you see the Lizard accomplish in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. There's also another Doc Ock story where he causes Peter to lose his memories, and then they are teaming up to fight crime, and then Peter resolves that. So thankfully Peter did that. So I don't know if I feel like there's one particular villain who really has the spotlight during this era. There's Lizard story, but I don't think a lot. I think you get another Mysterio story. I don't even really know if Sandman shows up. Vulture, they introduce a second Vulture because I think they were probably like, you know what, an old man Vulture's pretty lame. But it turns out that the second Vulture is not nearly as cool as old man Vulture. So that's really neat. You have I think the Kangaroo. I think they introduced the Kangaroo. I don't know why he hasn't been in a movie. Oh, very significant is the Rhino. I think he and Mary Jane show up in the same issue where she shows up on the last page of an issue, and then the next issue, which is her first full issue, is with the Rhino. Now, I'm going to suggest another comic completely different from this that is one of the best Spider-Man comics of all time. It's called Spider-Man Blue. It's by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, and it takes place during this era. It actually starts with this issue, and it ends with, I don't remember where it ends, but that other Vulture's in it, and you see Kraven. It does have there is a Kraven story it specifically ties into. So that's a really, really amazing Spider-Man story. But I will say it does spoil something in the next run that we'll be talking about, which we're not at yet. So just keep that in mind. They create the Kingpin, and maybe he becomes something of the ongoing. I feel like there's some with him and still kind of in that low crime era. But yeah, overall, it's a lot of done-in-one stories, and I think that the overall connective tissue really comes down to the soap opera between Peter and his friends, and that element of the story really starting to flourish. Peter becomes really funny, becomes likable, unlike the Steve Ditko version. So all in all, it's absolutely worth checking out. And if you are new to comics, as long as you're willing to read an old school comic that's a little overwritten and it's going to explain a lot, some stuff that you know, some stuff maybe you don't, I would say it's worth checking out. This era of the comics really reminds me of the Spider-Man 2 Sam Raimi Tobey Maguire movie, where you've got Peter in college, you've got a great villain story, and it just is kind of firing on all cylinders. And even when Romita's not doing the art, like I said, Gil Kane's an amazing artist, very underrated, and we'll be talking about him more in, I think, one of the next videos. But John Buscema is someone I forget. I'm pretty sure he did some issues, but quite different from maybe how his Avengers look. And really, I don't know. People don't really talk about that a lot. So just like I didn't. So I apologize. So the next video that I'm going to do is actually going to kind of round out the 60s. Of course, I'm missing a ton of stuff, but I'm just trying to give you kind of a general overview, stuff that I think you might like or not like. If I find that there's a low of this run, I would say it's kind of the same thing I had with the Ditko stuff, where it can be a little overwritten. and sometimes that pacing can hurt it. But if you don't read the captions, that helps speed it up a little bit. But other than that, I don't think there's any really controversial storylines. The highs would be Spider-Man No More, the Green Goblin reveal, Death of Captain Stacy. Those are some great stories that I just rambled off. Even smaller stories, like I said, where I know there's like a Lizard, Human Torch story with Spider-Man No More, and some of the other ones like the Doc Ock Spider-Man losing his memory. That's a lot of fun. The first Rhino Mary Jane stuff, that's good. So you will get a lot of classic, iconic stuff, and nothing too abrasive or offensive. It would just be if you don't like that kind of style, I would say. So, thank you for checking this out. I hope you check out some of my other stuff, and like and share. Thanks.